insufficient bathrooms and that its heating system left much to be desired, the couple, out of politeness to Queen Mary, saved their grumblings for an appropriate future date. The king declared Elizabeth, despite her commoner status, Royal Highness, and she was elevated to princess. After Queen Mary, Queen Alexandra, and the Princess Royal, she was the fourth Lady of England. She would soon be the first commoner since Catherine Parr, last wife of Henry VIII, to become queen. In November, no longer able to endure the plumbing at White Lodge, the Yorks moved into Curzon House, Curzon Street, which was to be their winter home. The Duchess was now 4 months pregnant and showed no inclination to have her child in any of the larger royal residences. With Scottish independence, she decided that she would become a mother in one of her parents' residences, either Glamis or their London home at 17 Bruton Street, which she at last settled on. April 21st was dark and dismal. The Duchess experienced labor pains. Some complications developed, and in the early morning hours, Sir Henry Simpson decided to use caesarean section. At that moment, the Home Secretary appeared on the scene, according to a time-honored custom, which had begun as a result in 1688, when there was a plot discovered to place a substitute baby in the bed of the Queen of England. The child, a healthy, noisy daughter, was born at 2:40 a.m. Even at that chilly early morning hour, a crowd stood outside, cheering excitedly when the news was conveyed to them. The child was named Elizabeth Alexandra Mary, after her mother, great-grandmother, and grandmother. The christening took place on May 29th, with the baby dressed in a robe brought by Queen Mary. It had been worn by both the Prince of Wales and his father the King, among other royal children. The Princess Elizabeth was at once made aware of Buckingham Palace. The formidable structure proved daunting even to its royal inhabitants. Yet it would one day be the princess's home. On June the 7th, a letter arrived at Bruton Street. Its author announced that the baby princess will be kidnapped and the Duchess of York will be murdered. The guard was doubled about the house. Scotland Yard investigated to no effect, and on June 21, a madman was seized wandering through the grounds of Buckingham Palace, announcing dementedly that he would take action against the royal child. He was confined to an asylum. Elizabeth was, from the outset, pretty, with her big blue eyes and rapidly growing golden hair. For the young princess, insofar as she was aware, Christmas was a magical time. According to tradition, the royal family took off to Sandringham House in Norfolk for the holidays. Between Christmas and New Year's Eve, much of the time was occupied with shooting birds. On New Year's Eve, at the exact stroke of midnight, a page in medieval uniform arrived, announcing the good wishes of the season. The baby Elizabeth was introduced to a world of unmatched privilege and wealth. As early as July 1926, the King was insisting the Duke and Duchess of York should make an official visit to Australia and New Zealand. The Duchess was very unhappy about the separation from her child, but the King's decision could not be countermanded. Elizabeth would stay in Buckingham Palace with her grandparents. In January 1927, the Princess accompanied her parents to the railway station. The child was already capable of royal control. She didn't cry as her mother said goodbye to her, and the Duchess, whatever her feelings, also showed little emotion. Even her parents were not as devoted to the princess as her grandparents. The King insisted upon her visiting him after breakfast each morning, and the Queen would entertain her at least 3 times a day. The prince's schedule was crowded. She was always on show, irresistible in starched skirts and giving insecure curtsies that made everyone burst out with laughter. Elizabeth's first birthday celebration was held at the palace and celebrated with an extra special Queen Mary tea party. So many were the gifts presented to the child that a special room had to be set aside for them. The Duke and Duchess at last returned to London from their 25,000-mile journey. Thousands stood to see the royals as they returned to Buckingham Palace. When the couple arrived, the princess toddled in to greet them. Her mother could scarcely restrain the tears as she hugged the princess and carried her to the balcony, gripping her tightly as the crowd cheered. For all except the royal family and some of the very privileged, 1927 had not been a good year. There were over 1 million unemployed. Hunger and poverty were everywhere, and many people lived in verminous, filthy, and squalid conditions. Nothing had been accomplished by the coal strike, which did not end until November. Paralysis affected everything. All the elements of class war existed in full measure. 1928 was to show little improvement. In November, the 63-year-old king contracted a severe cold and fever.